Spider-Man is one of the greatest heroes ever, but even he does things he isn't proud of. Here are the worst things Spider-Man has ever done. Kicking it off with giving up his marriage to Mephisto. What even was that? Peter, this whole thing was super frustrating because it was just kind of strange. I get why it happened. From the outside, like, Peter and MJ had been together for decades and Marvel wanted to explore different stories and relationships for the hero, but people loved this couple, so having them break up was definitely gonna ruffle some feathers, but they didn't even break up in like a normal way. Peter literally made a deal with the devil. They didn't just break up. The devil deal erased their marriage from existence. It never happened. And that's where a lot of people were lost. This whole thing happened because Aunt May wasn't feeling so good and Peter couldn't bear to let his mother figure go, so when presented with the option to save her, he took it. It just so happened that the thing Mephisto wanted in return was Peter's marriage. Moving into some more like recent-ish activity, one of the most iconic fights of Spider-Man's career was Craven's last hunt when Craven buried him alive. It's now decades down the line and Spider-Man has given the villain a taste of his own medicine. Last summer's Amazing Spider-Man 33 featured an evil-infused Peter Parker getting some long overdue revenge for what happened to him back in the 80s. This time around, Spider-Man is the one hunting Craven and throwing him 6 feet under. In his clouded with evil mind, Peter doesn't particularly care that the Craven he's chasing now isn't the one that threw him under, deeming him close enough. The whole comic is showing a much colder side to Spider-Man readers aren't used to seeing, especially towards the end where Peter throws a weapon down into the casket, saying, "In case you want to skip to the end," before closing it up and throwing the dirt. This was of course a reference to the original comic when Craven ended it all with that same weapon. So yeah, Peter is pretty ruthless when he is forced to let go of his good guy nature. And he did not stop with Craven. Evil Peter went after everybody. Tombstone was in the hospital on life support, and after burying Craven, Spider-Man paid him a little visit, went right over to the ventilator and just yanked that out of the wall, escaping into the night in a flash of lightning, laughing his head off. In the end, the hospital staff was able to bring Tombstone back, but then Spider-Man went after Norman Osborn and Paul and Mary Jane. Luckily, no one was fatally injured in the end, but it wasn't cute. Spider-Man has generated millions in property damage over his crime-fighting career, and it's not always his fault, but in the case of Amazing Spider-Man 1, when he is trying to join the Fantastic Four, it was intentional. Spider-Man is looking for a super team with a salary, so he swings by the F4 headquarters. More specifically, he swings through a window, which triggers the defense measures. In this case, it's a big plexiglass cage that cost the team tens of thousands in today's money. Spider-Man is first, breaking into their headquarters, and second, potentially damaging very delicate, very expensive machinery. I can't imagine that this would ever help his case, and after he does end up escaping, he fights the team and literally throws some of them around the room. It's only when he finds out that the F4 wouldn't pay him that he actually gets out of there. Now this is pretty tame in comparison to like burying someone or unplugging their life support, but it's not exactly Peter's finest moment either. Peter Parker's roast of Harry Osborn in the PS5 Spider-Man 2 game is completely out of pocket, and yet surprisingly not that out of character considering he had a sim connected to him at the time. It deserves a spot because it's not funny, but it's a little funny. Peter, MJ, and Harry are having a disagreement because Peter has been acting weird. Both MJ and Harry ask Peter to give up the sim suit. Peter doesn't want to, he's on edge. It's also important to note that Harry is visibly sick in this moment. When Peter is showing hesitation to give up the suit, Harry makes a side comment and Peter took that personally. For some reason, he decides to go straight for the jugular with the response, "Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you're really feeling?" Harry was not doing a thing to Peter in this particular moment. He was literally just sitting in a chair and Peter went off. So Peter, please relax. Peter's show of strength against Captain America and Amazing Spider-Man 23 was unexpected to say the least. To set the scene, Peter is on the run and he hasn't looked worse. Very much at the end of his rope, as he is running through an alley, Captain America suddenly turns up to try and talk and help out the young hero, but again, Peter is not even at the end of his rope anymore, he's let go of it. Out of pure frustration, Peter grabs Cap's shield from him and full-on slams it into his face hard enough for it to crack. He cracked Captain America's shield on Captain America's face, and that is so embarrassing, I'm gonna be so honest. And adding salt to the wound, Peter did escape, slipped away. Okay, so this next one isn't really Peter's fault because he didn't know, but he does hate himself for it. So in the limited series Spider-Man Reign, we meet a Peter that has seen better days. We are in a future with no heroes. The city has fallen into ruins. At this point, Peter is old and has not been Spider-Man for a long time, no plans to ever do it again. A bright spot is that Peter got to marry his longtime love, Mary Jane. The two loved each other a lot, but learned the hard way that Peter was radioactive and anything that he produces is also radioactive, so like if you know, you know. Prolonged exposure to this radioactivity caused MJ to develop cancer and ultimately pass away. This is not an easy thing for anyone to deal with, but Peter feels extremely guilty and is grappling with the fact that his superpowers, which were supposed to be a really good thing, ended up being his lover's demise. Adding on top of that, as Mary Jane was laying in her hospital bed, Peter had to step out to stop a crime, only to find out that in his absence, she passed on, and that guilt has and will weigh on him for the rest of his life. Now again, this is not really Peter's fault. Is it his fault? It's up for debate, though this is definitely one of the worst things Peter has done and has had done to him at the same time. I am referring to that time he became a zombie in Marvel Zombies' Dead Days. After being bit, Spider-Man desperately tries to get MJ and Aunt May to a safe location, but the zombification happens too quickly and the hunger kicks in, and I'm sure you can guess what happened to the two women. The brutal part is, Peter knows what's happening and he feels all the pain and guilt afterward. Again, he didn't want to do it, the hunger made him do it. The zombie infestation on Earth gets so bad that these super zombies start jumping across the universe in search of food, making this everyone else's problem too. Spider-Man is the first of the zombies to have his evil hunger taken care of. He eventually makes it to a universe where he can make the cure, so happy ending at least. The 80s were the time for a black-suited Peter Parker to constantly be put in stressful situations. Okay, so we are looking at Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 110. In this one, Peter's first love, Betty, was kidnapped by the villain Sin Eater, and it was not looking good. Spider-Man teams up with Daredevil to get her back. The two crash into the room and quickly disarm and knock out the villain. But in a very out-of-character moment, Spider-Man literally starts to hit a guy while he's down. It gets to the point where Daredevil has to physically step in between the villain and Peter. This, of course, ends in a fight between the two heroes, with Daredevil thrown out the window, and him admitting that if Spider-Man was in a more sound frame of mind, he would come out on top. Spider-Man is not one to really permanently end somebody, but every once in a while, mistakes do happen. A pretty nasty one took place in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. Towards the end of the comic, Spider-Man and Wolverine are fighting in a graveyard. Now, both of these heroes are like the strongest and the toughest there is, which means they aren't exactly pulling punches. In fact, they're putting everything they have into their attacks. Also present in the mix here is a human woman named Charlie that both parties are trying to keep safe. Unfortunately, Charlie got a bit too close to the action and set off Peter's spider sense. Thinking it was Wolverine, a very stressed and tired Peter turned around and threw everything he had left into a punch. The kind of punch a Wolverine could survive, but definitely not your average person. The thing is though, is Charlie wanted that to happen. Wolverine literally explains that on panel, so now Spider-Man is being haunted by this guilt when it was what she really wanted all along. It's completely messed up, but when is his spider trauma not? But what do you think? Let us know. Bye!